I pulled into my parents' driveway with a homemade apple pie balanced on my lap and a trunk full of thoughtfully wrapped gifts. After months of working 60-hour weeks and finally getting my life back on track, I was looking forward to reconnecting with everyone at our annual Thanksgiving dinner. Sure, things had been tense with Mom and my sister Tanya lately, but holidays were for healing, right? That hope shattered when I reached the front door. My Uncle Richard stood there like a bouncer, arms crossed. Behind him, I could see my mom laughing as she handed my usual seat to Tanya's new boyfriend. I just nodded, returned to my car, and pulled out the message I had been saving for months. Let me know where you are watching from. And hit that like and subscribe button before I tell you how half my family chose truth over turkey this Thanksgiving. Looking back, I should have seen it coming. At 32, I had spent most of my adult life being the family fixer. When my dad passed away 5 years ago, I stepped up without hesitation. Mom needed help with mortgage payments. I covered them. Tanya could not afford college tuition. I worked overtime for 3 years straight to make sure she graduated debt-free. Uncle Richard needed a place to stay during his messy divorce. I gave him my spare bedroom for 8 months. That was just what family did for each other, I thought. I never kept score or expected anything in return. The pride I felt watching Tanya walk across the stage at graduation or seeing Mom keep the house she and Dad had worked so hard for was payment enough. Even when it meant postponing my own dreams or stretching my bank account dangerously thin, family always came first. My ex-wife used to say I cared more about my birth family than the one we were trying to create. Looking back, maybe she had a point. The change started about 8 months ago. After my divorce finalized, I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Wilson who specialized in family dynamics. Our sessions often circled back to the same uncomfortable truth. I was stuck in a pattern of unhealthy codependency with my family. I paid their bills, solved their problems, and enabled behaviors that kept them dependent on me. The therapist suggested I needed to establish boundaries for my own well-being. Setting boundaries proved harder than I expected. The first time I told Mom I could not pay for her Caribbean cruise, you would have thought I had committed a cardinal sin. She did not speak to me for 2 weeks. When Tanya asked for $5,000 to invest in her boyfriend Jason's new business venture, my refusal was met with tears and accusations that I had never really supported her dreams. Uncle Richard was perhaps the most shocked when I declined his request for a $10,000 loan to buy a boat. He had never repaid the previous loans, always brushing them off as gifts between family. This time I stood firm, explaining that I was saving for my own future. The coldness in his eyes should have warned me then. Around this time I met Allison, a school counselor with kind eyes and a talent for seeing through people's facades. On our third date, I found myself confessing my family situation. Instead of the judgment I expected, she offered understanding. Healthy love has boundaries, she told me. Real family respects them. With her encouragement, I continued therapy and worked on building a life that balanced family loyalty with self-respect. As I created healthier boundaries, I noticed my family gatherings becoming increasingly tense. Invitations to Sunday dinners became less frequent. Group texts often excluded me. When we did get together, conversations would halt when I entered the room. I told myself it was just an adjustment period. They would eventually understand I still loved them, just in a healthier way. The first serious red flag appeared 4 months ago. I received a bank statement for an account I rarely used, planning to close it soon. Scanning the transactions, my blood ran cold. There were withdrawals I had never made, mostly in towns where my sister and uncle lived. When I called the bank to report potential fraud, they confirmed the withdrawals were made using my debit card and PIN. I changed all my passwords immediately and began monitoring my credit more closely. What I found disturbed me deeply. 3 credit card applications had been submitted in my name within the past year. 2 personal loans had been taken out using my Social Security number and personal information. The signature on the applications looked suspiciously like my uncle's handwriting. Instead of confronting them immediately, I contacted my college friend Marcus, now a lawyer, specializing in identity theft. He advised me to gather evidence quietly while protecting my finances. For months, I collected bank statements, credit reports, and even obtained security camera footage from an ATM, where someone using my card had withdrawn $800. The person wore a hoodie, but the height and build matched my uncle. Marcus helped me file police reports and freeze my credit. We compiled everything into a comprehensive file that would be difficult to dispute. When you are ready to confront them, Marcus said, one message with these attachments will change everything. Despite everything I still hoped for, reconciliation. Thanksgiving seemed like the perfect opportunity to clear the air. Maybe seeing the evidence would shock them into remorse. Maybe we could find a way forward that respected everyone's boundaries. I spent days perfecting my grandmother's apple pie recipe, wrapping thoughtful gifts and rehearsing what I would say after dinner. The morning of Thanksgiving, Mom called to confirm I was coming. "We have missed you, Van," she said with unusual warmth. "Tanya has been asking about you too. My sister even sent a text saying she could not wait to see me." For the first time in months, hope bloomed again. Maybe they had reflected on their behavior. Maybe they missed our relationship as much as I did. As I drove to my childhood home, memories flooded back. Dad teaching me to ride a bike in that driveway. Mom and I planting tulips along the walkway. Tanya and I building snowmen in the front yard. This house held the best parts of my past. I was determined to preserve what mattered in our family while leaving the dysfunction behind. The apple pie smelled delicious, filling my car with cinnamon and nutmeg. The trunk contained carefully chosen gifts. Mom's favorite perfume, a signed first edition for Tanya. Even a nice bottle of scotch for Uncle Richard as a peace offering. I had even prepared to politely decline if they asked for money without making anyone uncomfortable. I was ready to be both loving and firm, just as Dr. Wilson and I had practiced. I parked behind several unfamiliar cars, noticing the house seemed unusually full for our typically small family gathering. Taking a deep breath, I gathered the pie and gifts, put on my warmest smile, and walked up to the front door of the place I would always consider home. I will never forget the sound of the deadbolt clicking as Uncle Richard locked the door from the inside before I could knock. When he swung it open, his 6'2" frame blocked the entire entrance. The smile on his face was not welcoming. It was triumphant. "Well, look who decided to show up," he said loudly, ensuring everyone inside could hear. "Sorry, Van, but you are not family anymore. Your mother wants you to leave." My arms loaded with gifts and the still warm pie froze mid-air. Behind him, I could see into the dining room where our family Thanksgiving had already begun without me, despite my arriving at the exact time Mom had specified. The table was full. In what had always been my spot next to Mom sat a man I recognized from Tanya's social media as Jason, her boyfriend of just 3 months. What knocked the air from my lungs was not Jason in my seat, but my mother's face. She was laughing, not nervously or uncomfortably, but genuinely amused at my public rejection. When our eyes met, she gave a dismissive wave and turned back to pass Jason the mashed potatoes. Tanya leaned her head against his shoulder without even looking my way. Mrs. Peterson, our neighbor for 20 years, was watering plants on her porch. She paused, clearly witnessing my humiliation. I felt heat rise in my cheeks as the reality sank in. This was not a misunderstanding. This was planned. They had invited extra people specifically to witness my exclusion, but I brought. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. The pie was still warm in my hands. "We do not need anything from you anymore," Uncle Richard said, taking the pie and placing it on the ground beside the door like garbage. "Jason is taking care of the family now. He is the son your mother deserves." The words struck like physical blows. My hands began to tremble as memories flooded back. All the warning signs I had ignored over recent weeks. Tanya posting family dinner photos without mentioning I was not invited. Mom asking seemingly innocent questions about my bank accounts and passwords, claiming she needed help with her own online banking. Uncle Richard requesting copies of my house keys just in case of emergencies. There was the strange family gathering last month that I only discovered through my cousin's accidental mention. The odd calls from credit card companies confirming applications I never made. Even yesterday I had received an alert about a login attempt to my investment account from an unrecognized device. I looked past Uncle Richard to the table one more time. A dozen faces, some family, some strangers. No one stood up, no one objected. No one met my eyes except my mother, who raised her wineglass in a mock toast before turning away. "Right, I understand." I managed to keep my voice steady as I gathered the gifts Uncle Richard had not yet confiscated. Happy Thanksgiving. I turned and walked back to my car with as much dignity as I could muster. Once inside, I sat in silence, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that my mind struggled to process it. These were the people who had shaped my entire identity, the people I had sacrificed everything for. Through the windshield, I could see Uncle Richard watching from the doorway, making sure I left. The curtain in the dining room twitched, revealing my mother's face for a moment, before disappearing again. They wanted to make sure the rejection was complete. My gaze fell to the glove compartment, where a folder contained everything Marcus and I had collected over the past months. Bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals totaling over $42,000. Credit reports detailing accounts opened in my name without my knowledge. The police report I had filed that very morning, something my family did not yet know about. There was also a flash drive containing an audio recording from 3 months ago. I had forgotten my phone at Mom's house after a tense dinner, and returned to find her, Tanya, and Uncle Richard discussing how they could access my investment accounts. Uncle Richard's voice was crystal clear. "Van will never know. He trusts us completely." My hand hovered over the folder. I had planned to show them privately after dinner, hoping for explanations. Apologies, perhaps, even a path to making amends. Now I understood there would be no private conversation, no opportunity for reconciliation on my terms. My phone buzzed with a text from Allison. "How's it going? Thinking of you." Her simple kindness, in contrast to my family's cruelty, brought tears to my eyes. That was the moment, I decided. Opening my phone, I created a new group message, including not just my immediate family, but all my extended relatives who were likely inside, enjoying Thanksgiving dinner. Grandma Rose, Aunt Martha, my cousins Patrick, Samantha, and Lily, even my father's brother Michael, who had flown in from Arizona. I typed a brief, unemotional message. I was just turned away from Thanksgiving dinner by Uncle Richard with Mom's approval. "Before I go, you should all know what some of your family members have been doing. I have filed police reports this morning." Then I attached everything: the bank statements, the credit reports, the loan applications with forged signatures, the ATM footage, the audio recording. Facts, not accusations. Evidence, not emotions. I hit send and waited, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. For 5 excruciating minutes I sat in my car watching the house. What if they all sided with Mom? What if blood really was thicker than truth? What if I had just severed my last connections to family? I thought about my dad and what he would say. He had always taught me that integrity mattered more than convenience. "The right thing and the easy thing are rarely the same thing, Van," he would tell me. I could almost feel him sitting beside me now, his steady presence, a contrast to the chaos inside that house. My phone began to light up with incoming messages, but I ignored them, focusing instead on the front door of the house. Through the large bay window, I could see commotion at the dining table as phones chimed with notifications. I watched as my grandmother, 82 years old and usually slow to move, stood up first. Even from a distance, the shock on her face was unmistakable as she looked from her phone to my mother. 2 of my cousins pushed back from the table next. Aunt Martha rose to her feet, pointing at Uncle Richard, who appeared to be frantically trying to delete something from his phone. Tanya had her head in her hands while Jason looked around in confusion. Then, exactly as I had described in the text thumbnail, half the table stood up. Grandma Rose was the first to head for the door, my cousins close behind her. Uncle Richard tried to block their exit, just as he had blocked mine. But Aunt Martha, all 5 feet 2 inches of her, pushed past him with surprising force. The front door burst open, and my grandmother emerged first, her face a mixture of fury and heartbreak. She spotted my car immediately and walked straight to me with a determination that belied her age. I got out, unsure what to expect. "Van, my boy," she said, pulling me into a tight embrace. I had no idea. None of us did. My cousins Samantha and Patrick were right behind her, both expressing shock and disgust at what they had just learned. Aunt Martha came out carrying the pie Uncle Richard had discarded, along with the gifts I had brought. "You always were too good for them," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Richard has been jealous of you since you were a child. I never thought he would stoop this low." One by one half the dinner guests emerged, dividing clearly between those who had known about the financial deception and those who were just learning of it. The latter came to stand with me, forming a protective circle around my car. Inside the house I could see my mother gesturing wildly, Uncle Richard pacing, and Tanya crying at the table. Jason, sensing the shifting dynamics, was already edging toward the back door. When caught in lies this massive, even the most elaborate explanations fall apart. My mother finally emerged, her face no longer smug but contorted with defensive anger. "You had no right to air family business like this," she hissed. "After everything we have done for you," I felt a strange calm wash over me. For the first time in my adult life, I saw my mother clearly. Not as the grieving widow who needed protection. Not as the parent I was obligated to support. Just a woman who had made calculated choices at my expense. "I am not interested in explanations or apologies," I said quietly. "The police have everything they need. You might want to contact a lawyer." Uncle Richard started toward me, but my father's brother Michael stepped between us. "That is enough, Richard. You have done enough damage." Tanya remained on the porch, tears streaming down her face. "Van, please," she called. "We can fix this." But there was nothing to fix. The relationship had not broken today. It had been systematically dismantled over months by the very people who should have protected it most fiercely. "I hope you all enjoy the rest of your dinner," I said, getting back into my car. "I have somewhere else to be." As I drove away, my phone rang. It was Grandma Rose. "We are all leaving that house of lies," she announced. "Meet us at my place. This family is having a proper Thanksgiving with people who understand what gratitude really means." An hour later, I found myself at my grandmother's modest home, surrounded by the family members who had chosen truth over turkey. Aunt Martha and my cousins had stopped for takeout chicken and side dishes from a local restaurant. It was not traditional, but somehow it felt more authentic than any holiday meal I could remember. I called Allison, who arrived with homemade cranberry sauce and quiet strength. As she sat beside me, her hand occasionally finding mine under the table, I felt something shift inside me. This was what family could be. Not perfect, not without conflict, but fundamentally honest. For the first time in months, maybe years, I laughed without reservation. We told stories about my father, good memories untainted by recent betrayals. My grandmother brought out photo albums I had not seen since childhood. In one picture, 4-year-old me sat on my dad's shoulders, both of us beaming at the camera. "You have his integrity," Grandma Rose said, patting my hand. "Never apologize for that." As impromptu Thanksgiving dinners go, it was remarkably healing. We raised a toast, not to blind loyalty, but to truth. Not to obligation, but to authentic connection. I looked around the table at these people who had chosen to walk out of a traditional holiday dinner because principles mattered more than appearances. Maybe blood was not what made family after all. The months following that Thanksgiving brought significant changes. With Marcus's help, I pressed charges against my mother, sister, and uncle for identity theft and fraud. The evidence was irrefutable, and they eventually accepted a plea deal that included restitution and probation. The legal proceedings were painful but necessary. I could not heal while continuing to enable their behavior. The family remained divided. Some relatives sided with my mother, believing that family loyalty should supersede legal consequences. Others maintained contact with both sides, uncomfortable with choosing. I respected their positions, even if I could not share them. The relatives who had walked out with me that Thanksgiving formed a tighter bond, our relationships deepening through shared values rather than mere tradition. My mother made one attempt at reconciliation 3 months after Thanksgiving. She arrived at my apartment, unannounced, a carefully rehearsed apology prepared. I listened without interrupting, noting how the words addressed the consequences she faced, rather than the pain she had caused. "I am sorry you felt the need to involve the police," she said, revealing everything about her perspective in one sentence. "I am sorry too," I replied. but I am not sorry for protecting myself. We left it there, an acknowledgement that some bridges cannot be rebuilt with the same materials that caused their collapse. Perhaps someday we would find a new way to connect, but it would never again be based on financial dependence or unchecked access to my life. Tanya's relationship with Jason ended shortly after he realized there would be no more easy money through her family connections. She sent me a lengthy email expressing remorse, explaining how she had gotten caught up in Mom and Uncle Richard's schemes gradually. Her apology seemed more genuine than our mother's acknowledging the actual harm rather than just the consequences. I responded with compassion, but maintained my distance, suggesting we might try coffee in public places before attempting deeper reconnection. Through it all, therapy remained my anchor. Dr. Wilson helped me process the grief of losing my idealized family image and the guilt that occasionally surfaced despite my rational understanding that I had done nothing wrong. Healing is not linear. He reminded me whenever I felt myself slipping backward into doubt. Allison proved to be exactly the partner I needed during this time. She never pressured me to forgive for the sake of peace, understanding that real healing sometimes required distance. Her own family welcomed me warmly, showing me what healthy family dynamics could look like. For the first Christmas season after Thanksgiving, I received fewer cards than usual, but felt more genuinely connected to the senders of each one. As the one-year anniversary of that fateful Thanksgiving approached, I found myself reflecting on everything that had changed. My finances had recovered, protected by better security measures and clear boundaries. My emotional health had improved dramatically, without the constant drain of toxic relationships. I had learned to distinguish between obligations born of guilt and choices born of love. The new Thanksgiving gathering at my cousin Samantha's house felt like the beginning of a healthier tradition. Grandma Rose, now 83, presided over a table that included only people who genuinely wanted to be there. Allison sat beside me now. Officially, my girlfriend. We had built something precious together during a year that could have broken me. I had invited Tanya after several successful coffee meetings had rebuilt a fragile trust between us. She declined, choosing to have dinner with Mom instead, but sent a thoughtful card expressing hope for continued healing in our relationship. It was a small step, but an authentic one. As we went around the table sharing what we were grateful for, my turn came last. Looking at these faces, some related by blood and others by choice, I felt a profound sense of peace. I am grateful for truth, I said simply, and for the courage to choose it even when it hurts. Later, as Allison and I drove home under a star-filled sky, she asked if I had any regrets about how everything had unfolded. Just one, I answered honestly. I wish I had recognized sooner that real family does not require you to compromise your self-respect. Everything else, as painful as it was, led me here. And here is exactly where I need to be. Have you ever had to choose between maintaining a relationship and standing up for yourself? What would you have done in my situation? Leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or experiences with family boundaries. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about finding strength in difficult situations. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into.